Oh, yeah, let's talk about Minnesota. I was told not to tweet this until the House is adjourned for fear of jinxing it, but the Minnesota legislature just completed what is probably the most productive session anywhere in the country since probably the New Deal, sweeping bills and reforms across every area of life. This is what you're supposed to do. Many people are saying that this is what you're supposed to do when you win power, no matter how marginal that power might be. Minnesota's Democratic Farmer Labor Part accompanied this monumental session with a 6-vote margin in the House and a bare 1-vote majority in the Senate. The scale of their achievement cannot be overstated. With no votes to spare, the Minnesota Democrats have implemented vast new social programs, enacted protections for groups threatened by far-right states in the Supreme Court, strengthened unions, poured money into schools, replaced infrastructure, and fed every Minnesota child. Just remember the things I'm telling you. I want to do this justice, so tomorrow I'm going to add all the high points of this thread, but the session ending a few minutes ago, I wanted to emphasize that something really incredible has happened here. Before I start tweeting individual policy accomplishments, there was a 1-vote margin. This was not a radical left-wing legislature, okay? There are plenty of moderate Dems here, but the moderates, unlike Dems elsewhere, still wanted to get stuff done and saw progressives as partners in making that happen. Rather than looking at the November numbers result and imposing some kind of self-limiting narrative about the scope of their mandate, the Minnesota Dems looked at their priorities and said, how much of the list can we get done? Turns out the answer was almost everything. It probably also helped that this was a younger legislature with many first-time committee chairs and newer members who were eager to start governing after years of relative deadlock in a divided state house. But the key here is that the DFL clearly figured, no matter how small their majorities were, it was better politically and morally to choose doing good things over doing nothing. And it did. Again and again. As for the GOP, there was just nothing it could have done about it. It complained a lot, but the Republicans just didn't have the votes. And undoing this session is a vast project that requires flipping 3 branches. Even in a purplish state, that's a high bar. Okay. So what did the Minnesota Dems actually do? In no particular order, let's get started. 1, they created a huge new statewide paid family and medical leave program, raising the number of workers receiving paid leave from 25% to 100%. 2, they fully legalized marijuana. 3, they made school lunches free for all students. This led to Governor Tim Walz being adorably mobbed by elementary schoolers. It was a great photo op if you recall. Which party protects the children, huh? How do you protect children? By fucking owning them for wearing girls' clothes? Or boys' clothes when you don't want them to? Or by fucking feeding them? Okay? How do you truly protect children? This is how you truly protect children. This image in and of itself is so crazy to me. I haven't seen something like this. I haven't seen a photo op like this from America in such a long time. It literally feels like we're watching, I don't know, some kind of like Cuban initiative put in place, when in fact, it's such a basic social policy. So remember that. Then they created new protections for Uber and Lyft drivers, leading the state senator Omar Fateh to be adorably mobbed by Uber and Lyft drivers. Here is that video. This video is awesome. Which party supports the children? Which party supports the workers? They codified Roe v. Wade, ensuring that Republicans can't endanger abortion rights in Minnesota simply by controlling the courts. They funded the replacement of all lead pipes in the state, another Sidney Jordan law. This one was so obviously good that it passed with unanimous Republican support too. $240 million went to lead pipe removal bill. They banned non-compete agreements and created a statewide paid sick leave. Another labor victory among 8 other major worker-friendly changes that came to the state. Minnesota Dems enacted a raft of laws to make the state a trans refuge and ensure people receiving trans care here can't be reached by far-right governments in places like Florida and Texas. Minnesota Dems ensured that everyone, including undocumented immigrants, can get driver's licenses. They made public college free for the majority of Minnesota families. Minnesota Dems also dropped $1 billion into a bevy of affordable housing programs, including by creating a new state housing voucher program. Minnesota Dems massively increased funding for the state's perpetually underfunded public defenders, like our boy, Alex Peter, which lets more public defenders be hired and existing public defenders get a salary increase. Minnesota Democrats raised Minnesota education spending by 10%, or about $2.3 billion. And Minnesota Democrats created an energy standard for 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. Minnesota already had some of the strongest election infrastructure and highest voter participation in the country, but the legislature also just made it stronger with automatic registration, free registration for minors, and easier access to absentee ballots. And they expanded the publicly subsidized health insurance program to undocumented immigrants. This one is interesting because it is the sort of thing Dems often balk at. The governor opposed it. The legislature rolled over him and passed it anyway. And last but not least, well, this is not the last one, but the Minnesota Dems expanded background checks and enacted red flag laws, passing gun safety measures that the GOP has thwarted for years. This in just the last 4 years? No, this is just over the fucking weekend, dog. What do you mean? This happened literally this past week. You didn't hear about it because the only fucking outlets that have been covering this shit overall hasn't necessarily been like any mainstream media coverage. These didn't all take place over the weekend, law. I thought most of this was over this weekend. No? Oh, it's in the last 4 months? I was wrong. My bad. It's been in this session. Most of it has been through this session. A lot of them were, oh yeah, the school, yeah, you're right actually. What am I talking about? I covered half of this shit when it happened originally, like the school meals program and whatnot. But yeah, it's through this legislative session, and a lot of the big changes came over this past week. Like a lot of the final ones, the cherries on the top came this past week. Anyway, let's continue. They gave the state attorney general the power to block the huge healthcare mergers that have slowly gobbled up the state's medical system. They restored voting rights to convicted felons as soon as they leave prison. They also made prison phone calls free, which is huge. I need you to understand something. This is a banger. This is absolutely a fucking banger. Minnesota on top. Tim Walz with a 1-seat majority versus Kathy Hochul with a supermajority. Yeah. So understand something, okay? This can be done. And the way that this is done is, first and foremost by voting, and voting for, again, often overlooked slots like the state legislature positions. Voting for Supreme Court justices in the state. This didn't happen because they voted for the right representatives in the House of Representatives and also the Senate. This happened through statewide elections, okay? So understand that. Understand how important that is, which is why I always tell you, vote early and vote often. And vote illegally, okay? Because it's not always just about like, oh my God, we're voting for the president, nothing is gonna change. Because yeah, the president sucks. But these policies will fundamentally change people's lives. So if you're voting down ballot, you might as well go up the ballot too. That's the best argument that I can ever show you for voting. They passed new wage protection rules for the construction industry against industry resistance. They created a new sales tax to fund bus and train lines, an enormous victory for the sustainability and quality of public transit. Transit be more pleasant to ride, more frequent, and have better shelters along more lines. What were we doing for shelter and bus stops in Los Angeles? This is what we were doing. Meet La Sombrita, the shade structure that only attracts more heat. This is what we were doing in Los Angeles, baby. That's what we were doing. They passed strict new regulations on PFAS, the forever chemicals. Minnesota Dems passed the largest bonding bill in state history, funding improvements to parks, colleges, water infrastructure, bridges, etc., etc. And they're going to build a passenger train from the Twin Cities to Duluth. A wonky but important change, they indexed the state tax to inflation, effectively increasing the gas tax. And they indexed a bunch of stuff to inflation, including the state's education funding formula, which helps ensure that school spending doesn't decline over time. They also made hourly school workers, like bus drivers and paraprofessionals, eligible for unemployment during summer break when they're not working or getting paid. Minnesota Dems passed a bunch of labor protections for teachers, including requiring school districts to negotiate class sizes as a part of union contracts. They created a state board to govern labor standards at nursing homes. They created a prescription drug affordability board, which would set price caps for high-cost pharmaceuticals. They created new workers' protections for Amazon warehouse workers and refinery workers. They passed the Digital Fair Repair Law, right to repair, which requires electronic manufacturers to make tools and parts available so that consumers can repair the electronics rather than purchase new items. He says, as far as I can tell, there isn't a single news story written about it, but they also made huge improvements to the state's Public Employee Labor Relations Act, making it far more labor-friendly by making staffing ratios a mandatory subject of bargaining. They made Juneteenth a state holiday. They banned conversion therapy. They spent nearly $1 billion on a variety of environmental programs, from heat pumps to reforestation. They expanded protections for pregnant and nursing workers already in place for larger employers to almost everyone in the state. They banned price gouging in public emergencies. They created a new child tax credit that will cut child poverty by a quarter. They dropped a quick $50 million into homelessness prevention programs. And because the small stuff didn't get lost in the big stuff, they passed a law to prevent catalytic converter thefts. They increased child care assistance. They banned captive audience. Oh, this was the one I was going to talk about. They banned captive audience meetings where employers force employees to watch anti-union presentations after they pay a $1 million contract to a fucking lawyer to come over and talk to them about how unionization will actually get them to lose their jobs, and therefore you should say no to unions without actually openly stating it. They forced a signal priority change to the Twin Cities transit. Trains have to wait at intersections for cars, which I can say from experience is terrible. Soon that will change. They provided the largest increase to nursing home funding in state history. They also bumped up salaries for home health workers to help address the shortage of in-home nurses. They legalized drug paraphernalia, which allows social service providers to conduct needle exchanges and address substance abuse with reduced fear of incurring legal action. Minnesota Dems ban white supremacists and extremists from police forces, cap probation at 5 years for most crimes, improve clemency, and mostly banned no-knock warrants. Minnesota Dems also laid the groundwork for a public health insurance option. There's billions of dollars of stuff I'm leaving out. It is truly overwhelming, but I want Sydney to have the final words on this thread. Good session. There you go. When there's a will, there's a way. When you have legislators who are actually willing to do the job, you can get this shit done. I'll tell you this much. For once, state legislatures actually do a lot of good work in many places, and it often doesn't get a lot of coverage. But this one was such a banger session that like a lot of people were talking about it. But ultimately, the Minnesota state legislature behaved like the Republican state legislature. But how does the Republican state legislature act when they have majorities or super majorities, God forbid? Holy shit. What do they pass? Are they passing bills like this one? No, they're passing the opposite. They're passing conversion therapy bills. They're passing basically bills that eviscerate trans people. They're trying to make sure that you have more than 3-minute ad breaks at the top of the hour. They want it to be longer. This is what makes Republicans so dangerous. They use the power they get. Dems always squander it. No, what's also important is how the Republicans operated. Because when Democrats actually fucking start doing progressive policy implementation, the Republicans can't turn around and be like, no. What we should do is actually still focus on like killing trans children. They have to come back to the table with proposals that are sensible, okay? They have to react to this kind of shit. They couldn't fight against this. When they tried to, they were forced to come up with policy provisions that were still what Democrats would push for in other fucking blue safe havens. They turned into docile little doggies, okay? So I just want you to understand that there is a necessity to vote. Obviously, this is part of the reason why I mention it. But the other part of this is that, like, when Democrats do behave this way, Republicans have to counter with not unhinged shit, okay? With boring policy proposals that get you nowhere. What are they supposed to do? What are they supposed to advocate for against this kind of shit? Oh, we don't want, pharmaceutical affordability packages? Is that what you're gonna do? No, you can't say that. You'll get fucking cooked about it. Okay? You'll get fucking eviscerated. So if you want to fucking use bureaucratic means to fight fascism or to fight like the coming wave of fascism, authoritarian fascism that is undemocratic and awful, if you want to be an institutionalist, fine. I don't like it, but at least get the fucking job done when you do have power. This is one of the main criticisms I have over the National Democratic Party. Because if the National Democratic Party was more aggressive, like the Minnesota Democrats were, the Republicans wouldn't be able to get away with like screaming about half the shit that they scream about on a regular basis. They had majorities. You get it? You understand? And the Minnesota Democrats could have done the same shit. They have centrists in there. They have moderate Democrats with districts that are threatened. They could have fucking turned around and been like, well, this is like fiscally irresponsible as a matter of fact. So I'm afraid I'm going to be the stopgap measure to this. But they didn't do that. That's why I always say, like, it's the fucking centrist blue dog Democrats that are the rotating villains inside of the fucking National Democratic Party that are the real villains of society. Okay? Republicans are going to do Republican shit all the time. They're going to be bad. They're going to be awful. They're going to be gross. They're going to be perverts. But at least the Democrats are supposed to do a job that they were hired to do, that we were elected to do. This constant screeching about this like civility and bipartisanship is just a way to try to dull the masses. And the media goes along with it. They ham up that narrative over and over again. As the Republicans spit on your fucking face and call you a pedophile, you're supposed to sit there and say thank you. When they go low, we go high. Fuck that. So it's great. Great. This kind of shit is awesome. And you should demand more from your local reps. You should demand more from your state reps. You should expect California state representatives to behave this way. Absolutely expect New York state representatives to behave this way. They don't. They don't because they are significantly more focused on maintaining their grip of power and creating a neoliberal stronghold. And that's why they lose. Stop going to the right. Fucking disgusting. But yeah, shouts out to Red Minnesota. They're communists out there. They're communists. They're Maoist third worldists, it seems.